Hello and welcome to another Fat Tell Daily video. Now today we're talking about a really interesting topic, the nuclear power question. Now Nick, I'm joined by Nick Hubble by the way. Nick, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Woody.
All good, all good. Now Nick, you caused a bit of a stir because we actually published this article a week or so ago, 10 days or so ago, and we've had so many comments. So obviously you touched a nerve. Now, so I thought we'd just get into a bit of a discussion about it. You argue that nuclear power wouldn't fit into Australia's electricity grid due to the existing investment in renewables. So, my first question is how do you see this lock in effect playing out in other countries that are considering nuclear as part of their energy mix? And what's the experience of other countries? What does that give us? Does it give us any clues in Australia how it's going to play out?
Yeah, I think it does. The big issue is that the key benefit of nuclear is that we don't have to build all the expensive stuff that makes renewables viable. We don't have to build all those transmission lines. We don't have to build all that energy storage. We don't have to build all the batteries. All of these massive projects that cost extraordinary amounts of money that are currently not getting built fast enough. Nuclear does away with all that. We can put nuclear where we want it. It's got a very high capacity factor, so it doesn't need backup in the same way that renewables does. But the problem with that argument is that we're going towards, regardless of what we do now, a system that is largely renewable, right? We're going to have to build all those cables, all that transmissions. We're going to have to build all that energy storage anyway. We're going to have to be building all of these expensive things that nuclear avoids, which means the big benefit of adding nuclear to this energy mix is negated, right? We miss out. Now, what's happening around the world so far with countries is we've got one example being France, where they've got a very high level of nuclear power. I think it's about 70 something percent. You can add some renewables to that. They're, by the way, struggling to do so. But that's fine because it's a nuclear dominant system. So nuclear can handle the demand for power. And then you've got countries with a lot of hydro, like Sweden, where their renewables are, you can control them, you can control their output. You don't need the energy storage. The dam itself is the energy storage. Australia's renewable system is solar and wind, which is uniquely bad at matching with nuclear. If, for example, we say to renewables, as most countries have done, we will prioritize buying your power first before we go to the backup, which is gas. That means that renewables are economic and are fairly efficient. It's the gas that's left with a very high cost because we're not using it most of the time. Well, if we replace that gas with nuclear, and you think about that, the key cost of nuclear is the fixed cost, which means it's only economically competitive if you're running it all the time, if you're really using it all the time. If you don't use it much, the cost per unit of electricity produced is extremely high. It's extremely uneconomical. And that's what the AEMO analysis showed, the Australian Energy Market Operators analysis. It assumed a very low use for nuclear power and therefore calculated a very high cost per unit of energy produced. Most people said that's ridiculous. If we had nuclear, we'd run it all the time, and so the cost would be very low. But my point is we've got too many renewables in the grid whose energy we've prioritized the purchasing of and using of, and therefore we wouldn't be running the nuclear power stations to the highest capacity because we don't need it. We've already got too much wind and solar in the grid on occasion in some places, and more is coming. So of all the combinations that you could have in your energy mix, the combination of a significant portion of nuclear, say 30%, combined with large amounts of renewables, with all of the grid and the transmission and the storage, is a uniquely bad system because you're not saving any money by adding nuclear and you're not using nuclear in a cost efficient way. So it's the worst of both worlds is what I'm really trying to say. It's like an energy no
So
man's land.
yeah. So I was going to say, so given Australia's current policies, like what shifts in policy or public opinion do you think would be necessary for nuclear to become a properly viable option?
I think we would have to agree that the whole renewables boom is a transition towards nuclear. So conveniently, the amount of time it would take to build a nuclear power plant, about 20 years, matches with the life cycle of renewables quite well, about 20 years as well. So I think in order for a transition to nuclear to work, which I think we should do, by the way, I'm very much pro-nuclear, we would have to say, look, we're going to do this renewables thing in order to get us to a French-style nuclear dominant system. Of course, we can have some renewables. That's fine. That's not my point. The question is where the base, the key priority is, where the most of the power comes from. And I think there's an opportunity to say the combination of nuclear and renewables doesn't work, but we could phase out renewables and transition almost entirely, so I'll say 70% to nuclear, like the French. Then it would all work out quite well. But we'd still be investing in these vast transmission lines and these vast energy storage facilities like the Snowy Hydro scheme. So even that doesn't really make sense to me. We're sort of in this, we've created a bizarre situation where there's no obvious or cost efficient solution. And adding nuclear at a small scale doesn't improve that situation very much.
Because it's so expensive,
And so
right?
it's
To build out.
yeah, it would be extremely expensive unless we were to say to a nuclear power plant, we will use your power as the base load. So we'll purchase as much energy as you can produce. Then it does become cost effective and efficient and in all sorts of ways. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think renewables will continue to be prioritized, and that undermines. I mean, would you invest in building a nuclear power plant that's only going to be used when renewables aren't producing enough energy? Would you invest in a hydrogen plant that's only going to be used when renewables are producing too much energy? None of these, as soon as you introduce intermittent and unstable and unpredictable power, anything around that becomes economically inefficient, right? Even batteries, if they're only getting used when solar and wind are producing too much or not enough, then it's almost as if they're sitting idle for some unknown amount of time. And so the investment implication or justification for those assets is undermined. And it's the same for nuclear. Unless we completely rejig how this is going to work in terms of where the wind and solar are prioritized, nuclear just doesn't make any sense to add at an incremental level to the grid.
Why is there such, and this might be a dumb question maybe, but why is there such fight back against nuclear from those that are really pro renewables when it is a clean
because
option?
it really threatens them, right? Because it provides that nuclear only makes sense if we use it to its maximum capacity factor. So if it's constantly running, constantly providing that baseload power, which would leave renewables producing too much electricity even more of the time than they currently are, and that would drive their electricity prices down. So they would get benefit less as a result. So nuclear is it's too good for the electricity grid and energy system as we have built it with renewables. It's too ideal, and it's so good that it undermines everything else. And that's why it doesn't work, because we've plowed all this money and made all these contracts with renewables that you can't transition to a sensible energy system using nuclear without undermining everything we've done. And so it's just that's why it's their economic interest to oppose nuclear. And the few countries that have succeeded in mixing nuclear and renewables have prioritized their nuclear so that it's running in an efficient, cost-efficient percentage of the time. I can't see that happening effectively in Australia without actually prioritizing nuclear over renewables.
But in order, it seems weird or strange that anyone would want higher energy prices or lower energy efficiency. Just that it goes against human improvement, doesn't it?
Well, if you can make money off it, then the fact that government was required to make all of this happen tells you that it's a lobby interest, captured interest, rent seeking is what economists call it. The consequences are going to be very interesting, because the worse renewables perform, the solution is always, well, we've got to put more money into solving the problem. So need more transmission lines because of intermittency, or because the weather patterns are too similar across too great an area. We need more energy storage to deal with the seasonality. The solution is always to double down. So once you've made the transition to renewables, once you've gone down that path a few steps, it's very difficult to come back out of it, right? Because it would require just doing what Germany's doing, literally felling windmills in order to get the coal underneath, right? It's quite humiliating and embarrassing and disastrous for the investors involved. So that's the trick here, is to push towards renewables to a high enough degree of the energy mix that all of a sudden everything around it needs to be changed in order to suit what we've done for renewables. And my point is, nuclear is not one of the things on the list, right? Transmission lines are, snowy hydro is, batteries are. Nuclear doesn't fit that puzzle that we've created. It's like a puzzle we've got, and we've put a bunch of renewable energy pieces in. And so now we're thinking about, well, what other puzzle pieces fit into that puzzle? And in nuclear, the piece just doesn't fit because of the combinations that we've created around it.
But do you think nuclear will win out in the end? I mean, what's your prediction over, say, over the next 10, 20 years? I mean, you make clear in your article that you believe that you conclude Australia is on course for a decade of energy chaos under renewables. What do you think is? Give us a bit of a prediction, Nick, and then we'll address the investment implications.
Yeah, my prediction is actually for 20 years' time is extremely positive. So I think
Yeah.
that all throughout history, what tends to happen is government gets involved in some sort of sector of the economy, and just completely ruins it and destroys it. And then companies and towns and smaller scale groups decide they want to do their own thing. We want to sort out our own supply of whatever it is that the government's made a mess of. And in this case, I think the answer is going to be the small modular reactor sector. So nuclear power, ironically enough, in the end. But on a scale where companies and towns and cities can decide, well, the federal government and state government has made enough of a mess of the energy system that we can't rely on it. We need to figure out our own solutions to this, and SMRs is that solution. So what I'm saying is that companies like Amazon and OpenAI and Microsoft and so on and so forth, they've got these data centers that need absurd amounts of electricity, and they're going to realize that the grid's not reliable. And if there's an electricity shortage, the first thing that gets shut down is going to be their data centers. So they're going to come up with these small modular reactors that they own, or at least have direct personal contracts with, that are not connected to the wider grid, that they can use that power at a predictable cost base, a predictable supply, and so on and so forth. And if that works for those big companies, then towns will start to notice. They'll say, well, our electricity grid connection is failing. This is already happening in parts of Germany, where towns are no longer able to expand or grow or have businesses that they wanted because the electricity supply isn't there and the grid can't handle it. So those types of places will then also turn to SMRs because it's been proven viable by the big companies that did it. And so increasingly over time, I think more and more towns, cities, businesses, industrial estates, that sort of thing, will start to produce their own electricity using these SMRs. And I think that is the long-term future of things. It's almost a privatization or a revolution against government-provided or influenced energy policy. And I think we're just going to leave all of these renewable energy assets, and especially the transmission grids, the high voltage, direct current transmission lines that are getting laid all around, all over the place, in some cases under the ocean. We're just going to negate the need for all of those by coming up with a better solution on a smaller scale in a decentralized way. Similar to what companies and even households are doing today with their solar panels, but in a way that provides non-intermittent energy, very reliable and predictable electricity. I think SMRs are probably going to be the best way to do that. Something else might come along. But the point is that our energy system as a whole has become such an extraordinary mess, and that it will fail in the next few years in such extraordinary ways that people will want to do their own thing.
So we're going to have to go backwards before we go forwards. But given that outlook, what do you see as the investment implications? Are there particular companies, technologies, or subsectors that investors should be watching closely in light of these challenges and the solution that you reckon will overcome them?
Yeah, in the medium term, as we mentioned earlier, these industries that try and solve the problems created by intermittent renewables will perform well. So, for example, the companies that build all of this electricity infrastructure, at the moment, we're assuming that some cable connections here and there will be able to fight the intermittency of renewables. But the problem is weather systems are very large, so it tends to be windy and sunny over large parts of either Europe or Australia or wherever it might be. So I don't think that's going to work very well. And the solution is going to be to build even more cables crisscrossing even more countries and continents to try and spread this risk of the weather over even larger spaces. So I think the companies building those sorts of infrastructure projects will perform very well. Battery companies I'm really bullish on because they are able to trade this fluctuation in energy prices from negative energy prices to very high prices. I think they'll be replacing gas and the backup of gas in the short term storage market at least. So I think that's good. But obviously the long term implication is that SMR companies producing small modular nuclear reactors, will be the beneficiaries of what I would call an energy revolution or an electricity system revolution that goes, almost against what the government is trying to do in the sense of trying to create this massive, complicated energy system.
Fascinating. We'll leave it there, Nick. Thank you for your insights. And for those watching, what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see Nick's original article on this story, Why Nuclear Won't Work in Australia, that's the title. It's actually, from what you were saying though, longer term, you're actually more positive about it, that you actually think it will work, but just in another form. So go over to Fat Tail Daily to check out that piece. We'll provide the link below. And like I say, it's a free daily email sign up. You'll find a sign up box on the website. Check it out and let us know what you think. Nick, thanks for your time, and we'll chat again next week.